Hello. Well, it appears there is a political tsunami heading for Westminster, and it's ReformUK that's riding that particular wave. Welcome to Grey Matters Extra. Hello, and welcome to Grey Matters Extra, where we look at some of the wider social and political issues that have been in the news recently, and obviously we couldn't let the local election results pass us by without comment, could we? Now, it's evident from our comments section that many of you support ReformUK. And whilst we here at Grey Matters try to maintain a neutral stance on politics, we have to acknowledge that what Reform has achieved in 7 months is quite remarkable. Now, although the party morphed from the Brexit Party into Reform 4 years ago, I referenced 7 months because Farage didn't take over the leadership until June last year, and that was when they started their ambitious plan to become the main opposition party, something that I think a lot of people sneered at. And just look at the results. 677 seats, overall control of 10 county councils, and 2 mayoralty successes, one in Lincolnshire and one in Hull and East Yorkshire. Although I think Farage is counting them as 2 separate positions, because I did see a comment from him that they won 3 mayoral positions. And of course, they have a new MP after unseating Labour in Runcorn, a major Labour stronghold. Now, the Daily Express claimed that worried Labour threw everything at Runcorn by-election but still lost. However, it seems they forgot to throw anyone remotely useful to their cause, like Starmer, for example, who was conspicuous by his absence. Reform's gains appear to have come exclusively from the Conservative seats. Reform won 677 and the Tories lost 677. With the Conservatives in third place with 319 seats and overall control of 10 councils, it meant that the Lib Dems came second in the race with 370 seats and overall control of 3 councils. I imagine they're well chuffed with that result, and I certainly didn't expect that. So where does that leave Labour? Well, it left them with just 98 seats. Yeah, you heard me right, just 98 seats, and overall control of 10 councils, which is 1 less than last time. So where did Labour go wrong? And what did Reform do to win that the other parties didn't? Now, Labour came in with a manifesto for change, growth and support for working people. But what did we get instead? Well, their downfall started with the removal of the winter fuel payment. That was a change for sure, one that came straight out of left field and totally blindsided the UK's elderly population, and it virtually guaranteed that 10 million old folk wouldn't vote for them. We've had many comments from lifelong Labour supporters who said they'd never vote Labour again. And then when we look at growth, well, along came the fiscal policies that, according to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, have slashed the UK's growth expectations for this year. It's unbelievable. And then, instead of supporting working people as promised, they launched a tax on them. Now, Starmer said this yesterday. Take a look at this snippet from GB News.
We were elected in last year to bring about change. That's what people desperately want. We started that work. Wages are up more than prices.
Seriously? That's blatantly untrue. The increase in employers' NI contributions have cut wage rises, they've slashed recruitment, which has suppressed employment opportunities, and reduced opportunities for companies to expand and grow. Much of the increase has been passed on to the consumers at the tills, and with other Labour policy failures, businesses are going to the wall. Even established and iconic British businesses are going bust. Moorcroft is one. A small but world-renowned jewel in the British pottery industry has just announced its closing after more than 110 years. I had a small item of Moorcroft that I sold a few years back. I wish I'd kept it now. The company blames increased energy costs that have reached more than £250,000 a year. which isn't surprising considering we've got the highest energy costs in Europe. In the High Street, which Labour promised to support, the last remaining Beale's department store is closing after a proud 144 years history, blaming Rachel Thieves' £200,000 tax hit. And this is their shopfront, which says it all really, doesn't it? And on top of the hike in NI, businesses generally are struggling with increased business rates and increased minimum wages. It's been one hit after another, so is it any wonder that so many are closing? Instead of supporting working people, it seems that the government is increasing living costs and then putting them out of work. One nasty little attack, which was actually in the last budget, but seems to have slipped by almost unnoticed, and I'm no accountant, but in simple terms, pension pots used to attract a high level of taxation if you drew lump sums from them. But recent changes make drawdowns more or less tax exempt. However, there's a price to pay for that. From this year, your pension pot will count as part of your estate for inheritance tax purposes, whereas before it didn't. Now, don't be fooled into thinking that inheritance tax is just for the very rich. If you still own a house that you bought in the 70s, 80s, 90s, for example, there's a very good chance that its value will put you right in the firing line for inheritance tax, unless you seek some expert financial advice to mitigate it. So in the run-up to the elections, we had a very disenfranchised population, many of whom were Labour supporters and many of whom will probably never vote Labour again. And I think Reform's success was largely due to the approach they took in that run-up. They rapidly formed local branches, and those branches had regular public meetings. They somehow, and I'm still not sure how they did it, but they somehow began to appeal to young people, and many of their branch committees have young people involved. From the outset, they were out and about being seen in public, and that included Reform's main figures, including Farage, Youssef, Tice and Anderson. They held frequent American-style rallies up and down the country in small, medium and some huge venues, and they ensured that all those rallies were televised and shown on social media platforms. Take a look at this clip.
Wow, that were brilliant, that were.
Yes, well, okay. Talk about a rally. It certainly was a rallying cry, wasn't it? Now, for a bit of fun, let's compare this to this year's Labour Party conference.
Conference, please welcome Joanna Baxter and the Platform Party.
Good morning, conference. I'm going to try that again. Good morning, conference. That's more like it.
Bit of tumbleweed moment there. If the whole conference was as dry as that, then I'd have been asleep in minutes. So whilst key members of ReformUK were out canvassing, where were the main figures from the other parties? Sure, they had people out door knocking, but Starmer and Badenoch were nowhere to be seen. Do they think that their party seats were safe? Did they underestimate the grasp that Reform had on the population? Well, I think it's clear that this government's horrendous, ill-conceived and in some cases cruel policies put them on the back foot. It was Reform's well-publicised policies and their get out there and be seen strategy that gave them so much success. If they hadn't been so visible, they would probably have had much less support and the Labour Conservative status quo might have been maintained. Now, there's much being said at the moment about Nigel Farage being the next Prime Minister, but you know, I have my doubts. I think it's clear that Reform will be the main opposition at the next general election, but I'm not convinced that Farage is the right man to take the keys to number 10. Yeah, he's charismatic. He's not quite Churchill, but he's a very good orator. He's a fantastic ambassador for Britain and British industry, what's left of it. But when it comes to the world stage, is that going to be enough? I'm not convinced it is. He can be quite divisive. EU leaders hate him, and let's face it, he regularly held them to account in the European Parliament. He never let them off the hook. And also his close association with the US President, who himself is quite divisive. I think that makes him vulnerable when it comes to meeting other world leaders. Now perhaps over the next few years Reform should be looking for a leader with a more statesman-like persona. Don't get me wrong, without Farage they probably stand a little hope, but they need him, I think, to lead the party to victory, but I think also they need a political leader who can present well globally. Now, I also want to comment on the dirty tricks that were invoked by opposing parties in the Lincolnshire mayoralty elections. Claims were made that Dame Andrea Jenkyns had furthered a political career by sleeping with a top Tory. Quite defamatory, I would have thought. Although to prove defamation, you have to prove a couple of things. Firstly, that it was untrue, and secondly, you have to prove loss. For example, loss of money, loss of employment, loss of reputation, that sort of thing. But you know, given how she won the election, I doubt she could prove loss. I think she probably just wants to draw a line under it and get on with business. But she was also accused of breaking electoral rules by not being resident in Lincolnshire, a claim that involved the police and a hearing that exonerated her. The electoral rules state that candidates need to live or work in the area, own or rent land or property there, or be on the electoral roll. Now, she has a primary residence in the county. So, you know, if you're going to try and smear someone, you really should do your research first. I mean, there's many MPs and councillors and mayors who own a house in their constituency but maybe live elsewhere. But that's within the rules, not a problem. But I really hope, you know, these kinds of smear campaigns don't gain a foothold in British elections, even if the smears turn out to be true. It's just dirty tricks, and I think we need to try and judge people on the way they present themselves and their policies and that kind of thing, you know, at the time that they're running for office. Now, if the current government wants a better chance of success in the general election, they must stand by their manifesto promises. And they've got to stop bleating on about the imaginary £22 billion black hole. They've got to give back the winter fuel payments, stop the boats, and even more importantly, stop giving away our social housing to new arrivals, while so many Britons are struggling to even get a foothold on the waiting lists. You know, there are lots and lots of people out there that would probably still vote for Labour if they stuck by their promises and if they actually did what they meant to do. And I think it was Diane Abbott yesterday who was saying that Labour, if they carry on performing as bad as they are now, are in line to become one of the other parties. That's unheard of. I mean, Labour have been around for hundreds of years. The Conservatives have been around for generations. And normally people are lifelong voters for their particular party. And that's changing. I would never have thought that we would have got to a time when the top three parties, Labour, Conservative and Lib Dems, would have been challenged so much that the whole landscape has changed. And Reform have come in from nowhere and have taken second place basically, pushing up to first place in some areas. So it's going to be very interesting times ahead, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say about all this, so get your keyboards out and get bashing. We do value your comments and we do try to read them all, and if you've not yet joined our happy band of nearly 40,000 subscribers, then it's easy to do with just one little click. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the bell to be notified of our future content. In the meantime, thanks for joining us here on Grey Matters, and until the next normal edition of Grey Matters is bye for now.